we also have another professor who was a neighbor of mine not so long ago, Professor Abhishek Ghosh. And I just got the bad news that he's down in Florida now. Electorate heals everybody. And but I always love hearing from Prabhu, and we're going to now. He's somebody that grew up in the culture of Krishna consciousness, and particularly Bengali Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and that brings its own special flavor. Somebody like myself, a convert off the streets, living a very different life for many years before coming in contact with the Gita, there's a nuance that comes through when someone like Professor Ghosh speaks, somebody who's really lived it and breathed it, their whole existence, it brings something sweet. So excited to hear from him now.
Thank you, Deva Madhava Prabhu, for that. Are you able to hear me?
We can, Prabhu. Yeah, great to hear you.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. And yes, I miss my neighbor from the Harmony Collective. But you're welcome to come to Gainesville. It's a beautiful place. When I was invited to speak on the Gita today, and I was told the theme is impact, the first thing that flashed across my mind was the asteroid that hit Earth and killed off all the dinosaurs, because that's what I'm constantly talking about with my daughter. It's like, impact. That's what an impact is on a global scale. But that's a negative impact, at least for the dinosaurs. In terms of a positive impact, another kind of a metaphorical asteroid hit my life. And that was a book that my grandfather gave me when I was about, I think, 8 or 9 years old. And he pointed to one verse saying, Chatur Varnam Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagascha. Right? I have created the 4 Varnas based on Guna and Karma. And this is the kind of training I received. Since you mentioned I grew up in a Gaudiya culture, it wasn't fun. My grandfather pointed out, says, why would Krishna create such a cruel system like the caste system? So here's the book, get the answer, find out and tell me. And so that was the first time I read the Bhagavad Gita, and I found out it was not about caste, it was a trick question. I ended up reading the whole thing, and I had my answers. And a guna and karma does not mean that you're fixed by birth. The guna is a quality, your talent, and karma is your activity or your career. So based on your talent and your career, you have a certain role to play. But even that, what your career and your talent and the time and money that you put in and the money that you get out of it is impactful in our whole lives, right? We define ourselves by our careers. However, there's one more layer to that impact, which is the existential layer. The question, why do we do what we do? Why get up in the morning? Why go to school? And I have so many students who tell me that I try to get through school as quickly as possible and skip through the boring parts so I can get to earning money. Right? It's like, okay, why do you want to earn money? Oh, because I want to marry the girl or the boy I want. I want to buy the house that I want. And it's like, why do you want that? Oh, I want to live, happily. And why do you want that? Because otherwise, what's the point of life? It's like, okay, right, let's pause right there. You want all these things in your life so that you can have an impactful life of satisfaction, right? And I think we are trying to look for solutions at a place where you can't find any. And that's how I often introduce texts such as the Bhagavad Gita. And the copy that I have now, this is my favorite copy. Are you able to see this? This was hand printed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur from his lifetime, and he writes that when I was composing the Bhagavad Gita based on the commentaries of Baladev Vidyabhushana, and by the way, that's the commentary Srila Prabhupada used to write the Bhagavad Gita as it is, so this is the source book. He said I was working all night, and within a month I went blind. And so he said, and remember in those days they didn't have a dictaphone, they didn't have electricity, so he was literally lighting a kerosene lamp and writing with his ink pen volumes of Vaishnava literature. And that's where I think the answer to why we do what we do is answered kind of tangibly, impactfully, and in a transformative way, right? And as we go deeper into the question of what is impactful for us and how can we be impactful for others, the one kind of linchpin to that question is we cannot be impactful unless there is sacrifice. Look at the sacrifice of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He literally drove himself to blindness composing the Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada, drove himself to starvation while composing his Bhagavad Gita, 1100 pages manuscript, which got lost. And from all that I know, he had an argument with his wife and she sold it to buy tea and biscuits, right? And so every decision we take, everything we do has an impact on the planet. The question is our impact leaving this planet in a better shape than we found it? And the stuff that impacts our life, are those leaving us in a better shape than we are right now, right? And that is where the knowledge of Shastras actually come into relevance. If you think about it, at the end of the day, the Bhagavad Gita is a little piece of paper and ink printed on it, with some words, but it's the ideas that are contained there that are impactful. It's only when we forget about this translation or that translation and just go straight into the ideas and focus on just one translation that is translating those ideas into our lives. That's when the Bhagavad Gita starts working. That's when we see impact. That's when, we see that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. That's where we see the Bhagavad Gita really come into play, right? So this is not an ordinary book. It is one of the most impactful conversations that happened on planet Earth. And it's so impactful that 5,700 years later, we're still talking about it. During Krishna's times, there was no American corporations. There were no yoga studios. There were no universities. There were no professors. Yes, there was education. There was farming. It was a rural society. But that conversation that happened so many thousands of years back is an existential conversation. Why are we here? What are we here for? Where do we go from here? What's the point of it all, right? And if I were to summarize the Bhagavad Gita in three simple words, three simple, impactful words, the first would be dharma, the second would be yoga, and the third would be rasa. What is dharma? According to the Bhagavad, dharma is satya, saucha, tapa, daya, the four pillars of a civil society, the four legs of the bull that impregnates the cow of Mother Earth, and then there is peace and prosperity. In fact, if you look at the genius of the Bhagavad Gita, and I'll give you a little pointer here, the first verse of the Gita starts with dharma kshetre, right? And so the first syllable of the Gita is dhar, and the last verse of the Gita says, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna Yatra Partha Dhanurdaraha Tatra Vijaya Sri Bhutir Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama. It ends with ma. So if you look at the first syllable of the Bhagavad Gita and the very last syllable of the Gita and you join them together, you will get dharma. Right? The book is about dharma. But dharma for what? When you practice dharma and you start interacting with the world on the basis of dharma, then depending on your guna and karma, you practice some form of yoga. And by the way, yoga is so varied that even your depression could be a form of yoga. Anything that connects you with your deepest level of existence, your Atman and Paramatman, is yoga. Right? So Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Vishada means depression, dejection. He's feeling terrible. But remember, every crisis is an opportunity. And whenever we are faced with a crisis, we can either fight or we take flight. If we take flight, we've lost an opportunity. But if we fight, we've taken up an opportunity to do yoga, to connect with ourselves, to connect with Paramatman, to bring out the best that we can in a crisis. But why do all of this? Why dharma? Why yoga? Because of rasa. Rasa vaisa. That means we essentially are living sparks, the dynamic energy that moves all of the static energy around us. And why are we dynamic? Because the essence of us is to love and be loved. Right? And so if we are to look at the Bhagavad Gita in these three simple words, which Mahaprabhu explains as sambandha, which is dharma, abhidheya, which is yoga, and prayojana, which is rasa. These just three simple words. You'd get the whole Bhagavad Gita in a nutshell, and it's actually quite simple and transformative, or rather impactful. Right? Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts today. And if I can take one question if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you.
The characterization there at the end with dharma as as sambandha, and then yoga as abhideya, and then rasa as prayojana. It's a very memorable framing. And I'm wondering if most of the watchers are going to be Braj Bhaktas at this point.
No.
So I'm just wondering how does that framing relate to that particular rasa that most of us are aiming towards? What is the relationship between the Bhagavad Gita and Vrindavan?
Well, rasa doesn't necessarily mean Vrindavan. Prabhupada says, give me Vaishnavas like Hanuman and Arjuna, who can get on the streets and fight the good fight. That's also rasa. So rasa doesn't mean pie in the sky when you die. Rasa doesn't mean escaping. Rasa means being present in the world. There is Veera rasa, that means the rasa of chivalry. That's also a spiritual rasa according to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So somebody who is working at Silicon Valley, somebody who is running a Harmony Collective, somebody who is working at Wall Street, they all have their own rasas, right? But it's covered. Every living being has a unique rasa with Krishna. But because it gets covered by so many layers of conditioning, we live in a warped reflection, so to say, Bhagavad Gita chapter 15. And only through the process of chanting and cleansing the heart, we discover our rasa. So how is rasa relevant to the person going to Wall Street? Well, if you are looking at screen all day, instead of letting the numbers worry you, you realize that at the end of the day, I'm dependent on Krishna. So that's dasya rasa. Right? To the book distributor going out during the Gita marathon and getting rejection. And I mean, think about it. Being on the streets and being rejected by every single person is not a happy situation, but doing that sacrifice is also a rasika experience, right? And so that's the rasa of dasya. Or if somebody is running an orphanage, right? And to see that these are all little sparks of the divine, they are all children of Shri Krishna. Let me serve them well, right? Whether we are cleaning the bathroom, whether we are writing a doctoral dissertation, whether we are tilling the land, rasa is integral to our life. It's not something that you get only in Vrindavan. Vrindavan represents the highest form of romantic rasa, but that's not for everybody, right? So everybody has access to rasa. We are rasa vaisa. That Krishna is Akhila Rasamrita Murti. And I'll finish this answer with a little Rasika Tika on the Bhagavad Gita. When Krishna is talking about Brahman, in one place, commentators point out that he's made a grammatical mistake. Instead of calling it Brahman, which is neutral or sometimes masculine, Krishna says Brahmi, which is feminine. And why would Krishna make a grammatical mistake? Right? And so a lot of people rack their brains around this. And one of our Gaudiya Acharyas pointed out that, even when Krishna is counseling Arjuna in the middle of a battlefield, in his heart he has never forgotten Radha. So that thing, that Brahmi, refers to Radha in the Gita, right? And so Krishna is Akhila Rasamrita Murti, the embodiment of all rasas, because he can be in Veera rasa in the middle of a battlefield, but also have Sringara rasa, which is in Vrindavan. And that's why Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. But for us, mortal souls, I think we need to start with the point of dharma. And this is why Srila Prabhupada pointed to the 4 regulatory principles, not as devotional service, but as the basic litmus test of whether you're civilized enough Bhaktivinoda Thakur used to say, first become a good human being, then try to become a Vaishnav. Don't try to become a big Vaishnav, try to become a better Vaishnav. Right? So I think that's where dharma and yoga becomes more relevant, and then rasa comes as a gift.
Thank you, Prabhu. Beautiful connection. And we also have to thank your clever grandfather for inducing you to study ardently the Bhagavad Gita, although for a different purpose.
He was like that.
Tricked you into paying attention in a very blissful way, we can all tell.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hari Hari.
I feel like I'm going to have to watch this segment again with pen and paper in hand, so I can jot down all the wonderful gems that he just shared. I'm genuinely blown away right now. I'm trying to.
We'll have to make him his own continent next time, so he can just have the program.
Exactly. Just a whole section for Prabhu. I'd love that.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Again, I think we all needed to have our notebooks with us. Well, we're going on